and welcome to Beyond Borders, the LU Off-Campus Programs podcast. My name is Lillian Sandberg, and today I have another amazing guest with me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is TK. I'm a third year at Lawrence studying geoscience and anthropology.
Cool. And where did you study abroad, TK?
I studied abroad in Northern Ireland. I was based in Derry, Londonderry. I did this over the fall semester. Um, and the program was looking at conflict, peace, and transition. So they were the main themes, I guess, were um, how has the Troubles impacted
Mm-hmm.
communities in Northern Ireland, and also how the politics have evolved over time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting. So peace, conflict, and transition, you
yeah,
said? Okay. Um, all right. So that's quite specific for most study abroad programs.
yeah,
Um, would you like to provide a little bit of background as for why Northern Ireland would be a good place for a peace, conflict, and transitions program for
yeah.
those who might not know the history?
hmm So there's been a lot of history in Northern Ireland and Ireland in general with conflict, but the most recent of their conflicts was the Troubles. So that was started in the 60s and ended with the Good Friday Agreement, a ceasefire in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very political and also, in a sense, religious, um, be- between like sectarian lines of Catholic and Protestant individuals, and basically like a fight over nationality and equality.
Okay, interesting. And so, what year was the Good Friday?
1998.
1998. Wow. So that is pretty much as close as you can get to like uh European conflict like in the recent times.
Yeah.
Um Interesting. Okay. And so why did you choose this program in specific?
Um, there were a couple of factors that I considered. One, this program was very community oriented,
Mm-hmm.
so it had an internship component. So we were placed at um, peace building community organizations for 7 weeks,
Okay.
um, and I found that really interesting, especially as an anthropology major. I
Uh-huh.
really wanted to get in the community and see what um, what the opinions were of
Yeah.
everyday people, and also like how are these organizations trying to build peace
Gotcha.
in a post-conflict society.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really interesting. And I will say the Northern Ireland program isn't super popular at Lawrence. So was it pitched to you in like a way by a certain mem like a certain group, or did you just like find it on the website and was like that one?
I just kind of found it on the website. I was looking at programs that were more like English based because
Right.
I have a background in German, but it's not very strong. So yeah, I wanted to be at least comfortable language wise
Uh-huh.
going abroad, especially being like my first time alone abroad.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. So I guess getting into some of the details of the program itself, you clearly mentioned the internship, but what were your courses kind of like?
I had two courses, well, kind of three, um, and they were very, very brief, but also intense.
Mm-hmm.
Sort similar to Lawrence, but even more brief. It
Okay.
was the first 2 weeks of the program. We were in class from usually 9 to 5, going like straight, and we had like half an hour to an hour break in the middle for lunch.
Oh, wow.
But otherwise, it was just straight lecture.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So
And what was it about?
it was, well, the two courses kind of like blended into one course, but they were
Okay.
graded differently. Um, so we covered all of Irish history.
Okay.
And then theories on conflict and peace and
Hmm.
how they evolve, and also um, uh, more like the political side of
Okay.
Northern Ireland and what their system looks like, um,
Gotcha.
especially compared to the U.S. There was a lot of comparison
Hmm.
in the classes to the U.S.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Cool. And so you said there's like 2 week intensive,
Yeah.
and then the rest of the time was just your internship, or
Yeah. So we had those first 2 weeks were the class, and then we had 7 weeks where we had an internship for 4 days, and then Monday was like a seminar day, so it was like another class day.
okay.
And during those days, sometimes it would be super lecture based. Other times it would be going out and speaking to like a victim survivor or
Uh-huh.
something like that, another community organization. Sometimes it would be kind of like half and half.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, there was that, and then there was also 1 week in the middle somewhere where we went on like an extended field trip to the border. We were Derry Londonderry is on the border,
Uh-huh.
but like going, I guess, further south.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what, how many people were in the program? One.
So it was me and three other students.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It was really small.
That
Really
is
intimate.
so small. That's so, oh my goodness. Wow. I surely you got to know those three
Oh
other
yeah.
people very well.
Yeah. We all lived together too. So.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Okay, so tell me about that.
We had lived in student housing, although apparently it's not always like that. There have been times when people have lived in like apartments
Hmm.
in the city, but we lived in student housing, so it was like a flat with 5 rooms.
Hmm.
So there was me and then the three other people, and then there was one Irish student
Okay.
from the Irish University, and we hardly ever saw her, but
But she
yeah,
was there.
she was there. So it was like a nice long hallway with like the rooms.
Hmm.
There were 2 bathrooms,
Hmm.
a small little kitchen and community area.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. I'm sorry, I'm still like wrapping my mind around the concept that you had 4 people in your entire program.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, maybe that means Lawrence has a pretty good attendance percentage if they make up a quarter of the students. Did they mention if that's like normally the case or if it was just like a low turnout?
I think it was a little bit lower than usual. I think it's usually around like 8 to 12 people, but it's
That's
still
still an
small
incredibly
numbers.
small number.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, that makes a little bit more sense how you guys all are able to do like the long term kind of internship sort of work.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I was like in my mind, I'm like, oh, the average program is about 100 people on it. Like that would be a lot
Wow.
to find, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, okay, so tell me a little bit more about your internship then.
Okay. I was placed at a queer support center.
Hmm.
So I worked on sort of two main projects, and then I was an assistant or observer mostly to some training, like community training.
Hmm.
The two projects that I worked on mainly were a uh, cross generational trans and non binary like planter um, or community garden.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, planter thing.
Okay.
So it was getting the different generations together to first of all get to know each other and
Hmm.
have some more interaction, and also to learn some transferable skills.
Okay.
Um, and the other project that I worked on was um, gathering sources for um, domestic abuse and like sexual violence
Hmm.
in the queer community to present to the local police department so that they could better um, support the community.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Those are seem like two very rewarding sort of projects to be able to work on.
Yeah.
Um, okay. And so how do you get placed with your internship?
So in the first week that um, we arrived, we were taken to like a little retreat in the north of Northern Ireland, and we spent a week there just um, discussing, what to expect from the course or
Hmm.
the program, and how to act. Um,
How to act.
yeah, there was a lot of respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be very careful with what you say and do.
Okay.
Um, but one of one of the things that we went over was the internship, and there were 5 different internships that were willing to take or take on an intern
Okay.
um, through the university, but also like an American intern.
Right.
Yeah. So um, we were given like these small presentations um, by the program director
Hmm.
of what the internships were, what we might be doing, um, and then we were all like given a few minutes to uh, think about what we wanted to do.
A few minutes.
A few, yeah, and then we spoke individually to the program director about which ones, or like we ranked them in order of like
Best
most
to worst.
desired to work. Yeah, um, and basically told him why we thought our top internship was going to be a good fit, why
Hmm.
we were interested in it, and what our goal was
Okay.
to get out of the internship.
Gotcha.
Um, and then we kind of left it at that. And a few days later, you come back, and if the internship placement had accepted us, then he would he would let us know.
Hmm.
And I think we all got our top pick.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
That works out nice. I mean, that's crazy that you have a couple minutes to formulate your like idea of like why should I do this thing? Why do I want to do this thing? Why am I the best person to do this thing that I'm going to do for the next 8 weeks?
yeah,
Like that's crazy. Oh my goodness. It seems very personable though, or like personalized.
yeah.
So
It really is.
yeah. Um. So did you enjoy your internship? I assume.
I did very much.
Yeah.
I think there were about 8 people in the office,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to know them all very well.
Surely.
I'm still messaging some of them,
Nice.
so yeah, it was a really great time.
And was that also kind of like a 9 to 5 sort of schedule, or like how does the scheduling for your internship work?
Um, it You talk with your supervisor. I had 2 supervisors, but you talk to them and kind of figure out what different projects you're going to be working on in the first place, and
Mm-hmm.
that will kind of usually determine what kind of hours you have, but also how late the place is open too.
Right.
Um, so my hours were a little bit different from everyone else's. I started slightly later, but I ended quite a bit later too.
Uh huh.
Um, so I think most of the days I went to work at around 10 or 11, and then stayed between 5 and 9 p.m.
Okay.
So depending on what kind of groups came in, they had different schedules for different days. So
Gotcha. Interesting. And did you like that sort of style?
I did, but I'm also a morning person, so
Oh, gotcha,
adjusting,
gotcha. Yeah.
yeah, adjusting the time that I did things was a little bit
Yeah, a little
rough.
bit, a little bit a lot. You're like, I could pull off the 8 to eight
Yeah,
to four.
yeah.
That sounds good to me.
Hmm.
No, I'm kind of the same person. Well, I want to circle back to something you said earlier about um, being taught like what to do and say and like how to act. Can
Yeah,
you elaborate on kind of what you mean by that?
yeah. So when we were going to meet with different like victim survivors or community organizations, it was instilled in us that we had to be extremely respectful of
Mm-hmm.
their time and their stories.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant being on time, well, being early usually. Um, Being late was not an option.
Yeah.
um, Making eye contact and like making sure that you're paying attention to what they're saying,
Mm-hmm.
not yawning or having any sort of like,
Facial reaction.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
um, and taking very limited notes, so that you're paying as much attention to them as possible and not just, I don't know, seeming to just want to write down their story for the sake of writing it down.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It seems good and valuable, especially given the nature of some of the organizations that you are speaking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, transitioning a little bit, did you? I know that you had mentioned that part of why you chose this program was to avoid the language, the like living in a different place that you don't speak the language thing.
Mm-hmm.
But were there any sort of like culture shock kind of things that you did feel moving to Northern Ireland? Because I know a lot of people assume that like Northern Ireland, New Zealand, like London, that there's going to be nothing really different because they all speak English and it's kind of the same. But I doubt that's the case.
Yeah. It was more about like the interactions that I would have with people that were very different.
Mm-hmm.
They communicate in a different style, so they're a lot more direct and willing to give you an opinion, even if you don't want it.
Okay.
Um, and they'll ask you questions straight up that you're not expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just like, especially around like election time, it was very common to just have someone come up to you on the street, and be like, "So, what's your thoughts on Trump? Do you like Trump?" And it was very abrasive sometimes, but
Uh-huh.
um, it's just their kind of style of communication. They're very open about um, speaking about politics like
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's interesting and good to know. And so I mean, I'm going to be honest. I had never heard of the place that you studied abroad in. And so I guess my question is, can you kind of explain like it is Derry, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's called. Okay. Can you explain kind of like the size, like comparatively to Appleton?
Hmm. Um, so their population is a bit bigger than
Okay.
Appleton's. I think it's around 150,000 or so.
Okay.
But the uh, the area that the city encompasses is quite a bit smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels initially like a large city, but once you get to know the place a little bit, you start to realize how close knit everybody really is.
Yeah.
Um, Everyone seems to kind of know everyone.
Okay.
Um, and you can get from one side of the city to the next or to the other in like 45 minutes walking.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's very small, and everyone you talk to will say it's a small city,
Uh-huh.
even though like the population size for us may seem like it's quite large.
Yeah. I often ask like where people are originally from, like size wise difference to where they studied abroad and to Appleton.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So originally from Appleton.
Was this your first time traveling abroad, or no?
No, I've gone abroad a few times with my family.
Okay.
Been to Germany and France.
Hmm.
So
So not your first time in Europe, but first time alone.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, first time alone, and also the first time in the UK.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And what did you think of the traveling by yourself experience?
Um, I mean, honestly, it wasn't too bad. I guess I've traveled enough that I kind of know my way around an airport,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean I like airports.
Right.
I think getting there was worse than coming back,
For sure.
and just like being super worried about missing a flight. Um, but I was also lucky enough to have like 4 hour layovers, so I
Gotcha.
had the time to get to my connections.
Okay. And so I'm assuming, was there an airport in Derry?
No,
Okay.
so I've we flew into London and then went to Belfast from
Okay.
there, and then we were picked up in Belfast, and then got a 2 hour drive to Derry.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
All right. So it's kind of out a ways from like your major areas.
yeah.
So that kind of segues into my next question, which is like, did you do a lot of traveling while you were in Northern Ireland, um, elsewhere, either within the UK or within Europe?
I did a little traveling in the Republic of Ireland,
Okay.
but I never left the island.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
All right, that makes sense. And then you mentioned that you went on a extended field trip.
yeah.
Why don't you tell me about that?
All right. So the extended field trip was just a week long field trip to um, the southern border in County Armagh. Um, and we visited a couple of different cities, different organizations, and they talked about what the Troubles was like in more of like the rural setting,
Mm-hmm.
um, and especially along the border in the rural setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there was a lot of traveling around and going between different groups and speaking with many different victim survivors and like family members who told us their stories,
Mm-hmm.
took us through different towns, showed us where exactly things happened, um, different memorials. Our program director was from Armagh, so he um, spoke a little bit about his personal experience. Um, but it was very intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there wasn't a ton of time to just like think it through
Mm-hmm.
yourself. You were just like going from one thing to the next,
Mm-hmm.
so it was very difficult for all of us, and we were very drained by the
Yeah.
end of it.
No, I was about to. That was my next comment I was gonna make. I was like, just generally speaking, it sounds so far that this was a very like heavy program,
Yeah,
which I mean, peace and conflict studies, like of course there's got to be some of that, but it does. I guess I was not aware of how like emotionally um I think there's a different level of like emotional weight that learning about something and hearing from people who were directly impacted by something has. And
yeah,
it sounds like it was a lot of the hearing from people and hearing those like personal.
yeah. The direct impact is definitely something that I was not aware of
Mm-hmm.
going into the program. I don't know if I just kind of skimmed over that part of the description or what. I don't think it would have changed my mind
Mm-hmm.
going or not, but yeah, it's definitely something I wasn't necessarily aware of when I went there.
Okay. And as an anth person, did
Hmm.
you like sort of that one-on-one like storytelling vibe more than
Yeah,
yeah.
it reminded me a lot of like the ethnographic research that we discuss in the anthropology major, which was really nice for me to be able to relate back to
Mhm.
what I learned here.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't, yeah, I don't know. This is different from what I was
Right.
expecting.
Yeah. Just different. And
Hmm.
that's okay. There's always going to be some differences. I don't know. You have an idea of what it's going to look like
Yeah.
in your study abroad program before you go, and then yeah.
Hmm.
But it sounds like there were a lot of like that seems like a big difference.
Yeah.
That would be good to know. So, um, okay. So this is a really broad question, which we can try and slowly narrow down. But like, do you feel like there were some? I guess starting in the academic sense, what are some of the things that you felt like you learned from your study abroad experience? Um,
I learned a lot about the complexities of conflict and post conflict societies, and what that means
mm-hmm,
exactly. I learned a lot about the human impact, which I it didn't ever really compute when I was learning about conflict before. So I think that really put war and fighting and violence into perspective
uh huh.
that I hadn't necessarily considered before, which sounds really sad.
Yeah.
But I think it's like a really important lesson to learn.
Right, absolutely. I guess that reminded me of a question that I had earlier about like, do in dairy, does it feel like you can see like the lasting impacts that, going what, 26 years on the end of that conflict? Does it still feel like fairly fresh and yeah.
Yes, absolutely. There are a lot of murals,
Mm-hmm.
and different monuments. There are also like parades, from both groups that
Mm-hmm.
are very contentious that still go on. There's still, honestly, quite a bit of fighting between people, not to the extent that used to be, but
Right.
yeah. And there are like even signs with the police stations. They have massive walls and barbed wire fences and things like that surrounding them to protect them from like petrol bombs.
Oh my gosh.
Um, and Derry is a walled city, so on the wall there's a section that is fenced off as well, because or to protect the buildings behind it
Mm-hmm.
from petrol bombs and paint bombs.
Oh my goodness.
So there are quite a few reminders that the conflict is still quite fresh.
Yeah. And does it feel like in the city there are still like tensions? I guess the historical conflict is it still like is there still sort of that nature with
Yeah, I mean there's still a ton of people that remember
mm-hmm,
exactly what happened. Lots of people trying to continue that memory,
mm-hmm.
and there are certain things that you just don't really bring up in public conversation because it's like too contentious or sensitive
Right.
for different people, that it could start an argument or it could escalate in
Mm-hmm.
some way. There are certain parts of the city where you'll be careful going,
Mm-hmm.
or going alone, um, and especially talking to people about the history.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like going to the bog side where a lot of fighting happened. There are a lot of reminders and a lot of places where you wouldn't want to bring up
Yeah.
the history, because it would you would learn a lesson.
Yeah. I guess when I initially asked you about the like learning how to behave thing, I was more expecting there to be like things about, what do you talk about and what do you not talk about in public with
Yeah,
regarding that. Um, but I'm not surprised to hear that that's kind of the state of uh, community relations, one might say. And so, did you when you were sort of engaging with people on history and topics like that, um, were there times where things? I mean, I feel like talking about history like that will always result in very emotional conversations, but um, were you like going up to random people in the street? Like how did you find the people that you and your class were speaking with?
A lot of the time it was our program director would like he had like set people
Yeah.
that he would like call up and be like, hey, can you talk to my students about this?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those interactions were like set up and more controlled.
Mm-hmm.
um, there weren't many times, if any, that I really talked to people out just randomly out on the street about
Mm-hmm.
those things. I asked my coworkers and supervisors sometimes, and that was always I don't know, it was always easy to talk to them about it.
Right.
And they were usually pretty lighthearted.
Mm-hmm.
If there were things that they didn't want to share, then they just wouldn't share.
Right.
Um, but yeah, a lot of the time it was in a very controlled setting, so I didn't have to
Okay.
worry about
That's
that.
good. Yeah. City wise, you said it's about 45 minutes to walk across the whole city, right?
Yeah, pretty
Um,
much.
do they do public transit stuff also?
Yeah, yeah, they have a very good bus system,
Okay.
and they're like buses that stay within the city
Uh-huh.
limits, and then also buses that go across the country back to Belfast.
Okay.
Um, their Belfast is on one side of the country,
Mm-hmm.
and Derry's on the other,
Dang.
and it takes 2 hours
Yeah.
by bus or by car to get there. So it's
Mm.
not a very big country
Yeah.
by any means. But yes, there's reasonable public transportation within the city and then without or throughout the country too.
Gotcha. And do they have my favorite thing, trains?
They do have
They do have
trains.
trains. Did you take any trains?
I did. I took. Um, there's one that goes up the north coast, and that's like the main one.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that so many times. And then there's also one that goes across the border to the Republic, and I took that one a couple times as well.
The Republic.
Yeah.
That seems like a fun way of putting it. Um, okay, so tell me about some of your adventures outside of Derry that you took.
So there were a couple like field trips, I guess, that we
Mm-hmm.
took to Belfast. I guess that's still within like the academic setting.
Right.
So
Okay. We'll
yeah,
start there.
but most of my personal adventures were just going to the north coast and finding different beaches to walk
Okay.
and just like um, explore and enjoy the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
which I've never had access to. So
Nice.
that was really fun for me.
Yeah.
Um, I'm geo major, so I looked at a lot of different rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Any notable ones that like stick out in your memory?
Um, there are a couple. One is Giant's Causeway. It's just a big rock formation that is very stunning and massive and very cool. There are lots of different trails too, so that was fun. I went there a couple times.
Uh-huh.
And then there was another smaller one. I probably pronouncing this incorrectly, but it was like Raymore Head or something like that. And that was just um, it was just kind of like along a beach. It had like two different signs,
Mm-hmm.
so it wasn't like a huge formation or anything, but it had some really cool, pretty rocks that I
Yeah.
like to look at. So
Cool.
yeah.
Nice. And then your adventures to the Republic.
Yeah. I had planned on my midterm break to go down with one of my flatmates, and that didn't necessarily work out. So I ended up going alone, which wasn't what I was planning and kind of terrified me.
Uh-huh.
But I went to Dublin and Galway and took the train
Okay.
to both cities, and It was very cool, but
Mhm.
very stressful. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I also didn't do a whole lot of independent traveling because people didn't want to go where I wanted to go, and I didn't want to go alone
Mm-hmm.
because that is really stressful. Like, I don't think people, I don't know. I personally, the way my anxiety functions, the fact that I don't know anyone for like 2,000 miles and across the ocean is already enough. But
Yeah.
then to like go get myself lost somewhere, no,
Yeah.
it's not it. So I think I independent traveled one time, and that was like 2 hours outside of Freiburg. Um, and everything else I made sure I had like a buddy with. So kudos to you for doing it. I assume you really liked Galway because don't they have the cliffs
The
out
cliffs
there?
are about 2 hours
Oh shoot.
south of, or yeah, I think south of Galway. So I didn't get there
Okay.
like the first time I went, but my parents did come at the end of my
Ah,
program,
okay.
so I went with them.
All right. Well, did
Yeah,
you like the cliffs?
I did. The cliffs are very pretty.
I figured that you would enjoy those
Yeah.
with the geo stuff of it all.
Hmm.
Yeah. One of my friends went there, and it seems really cool. So
Yeah.
yeah. Why don't you tell me about some of your favorite memories studying abroad?
One with my internship was when we we all they took me to dinner.
Okay.
It was at I, I don't remember what kind of restaurant exactly. I think it was Thai,
Okay.
which I found really interesting. But they would take me to a Thai place. um,
Was this at the beginning or
no,
towards the
it
end?
was at the very end.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, it was like freezing cold and raining, and one of my supervisors picked me up, and then two other of my coworkers um, in her massive van. It was huge. But we got to the restaurant, and there was just like they were in this massive table, and we all just kind of sat around and just kind of uh, what they call slagging each other off.
Uh-huh.
They were just like teasing at each other super hard for like the entire time, and it was amazing to sit and
Yeah.
watch. um, I didn't I didn't really get into the conversation that much, but
Mhm.
it was they were super fun, and
Yeah.
it was just an awesome night. And
Mhm.
they gave me gifts, and they paid for my food, and that in one way kind of annoyed me because they had paid for like so much of my food previously. It was like, you guys can't keep doing this.
Mhm.
But it was really sweet, and it was nice. They liked me enough to do
Yeah.
that for me.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
That's so fun. Um, I feel like saying the like goodbyes part of studying abroad is like the hardest part, but I can't even begin to fathom if there were only, the three students that you were studying abroad with, and then your group of like 8 coworkers or whatever. That's such a like how deep those relationships must have been, that
Yeah.
it must have been even harder than like
Yeah.
leaving a normal program.
It was super hard.
Yeah.
And the internship ended, and before the program ended,
Mm-hmm.
so I had like 2 weeks to like write papers and give presentations on
Gotcha.
what I had learned. So during those 2 weeks, I did go back a few times and
Good.
yeah, played a lot of games with them, and had some more meals.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the last goodbye for each one of those coworkers that I was very close to was very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you said your parents came afterwards.
Hmm.
Um, my mom also came to Germany afterwards, and I found that as soon as all of my friends had left Freiburg, and then once I had left Freiburg and like left my roommates, like, not that the magic all disappeared, but I realized how much of like the joy and value that I got out of study abroad was about the people and not the place.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel similarly once you?
Yeah. Yeah. Once my parents got there, it was just like, okay, I'll show you around the city.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like I was giving them a tour,
Mm-hmm.
and we were doing all these different things. And I was like, man, this does not feel the same.
I know.
It's like, I need my people back.
Right. Yeah. Honestly just, it was such a crazy phenomenon because I was so like upset about leaving the people behind,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought I was going to be so upset about leaving the city behind, but after like spending an extra week there after all the people that I was close to had left, I was like, it's just a city. Like I mean, it's a great city. I love the city, but it's really the people that make so much of the experience.
Yeah.
So I think people underestimate that whenever they're like, oh, I'm going to jet set to every single place in Europe while I'm studying abroad in Europe. And like, no, it's about those relationships that you make with individuals.
Yeah.
That's where the lessons really come from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how is it trying to keep in touch so far?
So far I've lost touch with my roommates like pretty quickly.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. But I've kept in touch with well, one of my coworkers mainly.
Mm-hmm.
And we just texted over the weekend a bit, so that was nice.
Yeah.
A couple others I have chatted with sporadically over text, but
do you have any other fun memories or little stories you want to share about?
There were a few times in the van, like when our program director was like shuttling us different places, where we got in some very odd conversations. I don't even remember what they were, but I just remember the car rides being like super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you learn so much about people on long car rides. So much.
Yeah.
It's great.
And we did this thing where we would our program director would usually start out by sharing different songs of his that he really liked, and usually how it kind of connected to our coursework too.
That's so like it's giving like middle school teacher energy.
Yeah. But then once he had finished like presenting his music, then sometimes there would be like an assignment where he'd be like, pick a song that fits this prompt and then explain why this song fits that prompt.
That's deep.
Yeah. But other times we would just go around and like share our different music that we enjoyed. But yeah, I always enjoyed that too.
Yeah, that's fun. When I drive people in my car, it's my way or the highway with music. But maybe I'll take a lesson from your program director and make an assignment. Little other note. So I guess first, how's coming back to Lawrence treating you?
Oh man, the first 4 weeks were really rough.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got back into the groove, and I've been just pushing through it.
Yeah.
But yeah, those first 4 weeks, I forgot how fast and how intense the coursework is here.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I agree with that. Like honestly, the first term I was back was like a weird fever dream nightmare sort of scenario. And honestly, this term's not going a whole lot better. So I think I'm still perpetually stuck in the study abroad work mindset.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Maybe it'll resolve itself soon. But yeah. Have you felt like there's been lots of people to chat with about your study abroad stuff, or not really? Are you just back in?
I mean, my professors are very interested.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've talked to multiple of my professors, and that's been pretty fun. A lot of them want me to bring it up in classes too, but I feel kind of weird about doing that, so I haven't as much as they would probably like me to. But I don't know. It feels really personal.
Right.
to share certain things like
Yeah.
that. So
No, that makes sense. And then who would you recommend this program to? Like, if somebody came up to you and was like, you know, I guess, like, yeah, what kind of Lawrence student do you think would fit the bill for a program like this? Because it does seem deeply, like, a little intense, very personal, very, yeah.
yeah, I'd say someone who does want that sort of like personal touch and ability to go out in the community and speak with the community a bit more. I think someone who wants that from an internship would do well. But I do think that you do have to have a grasp on your emotions before you go to this program. You need to know your limits.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know those things, you're probably going to struggle quite a bit. I know one of my flatmates struggled a lot with like emotional health
Mm-hmm.
because she wasn't expecting it either,
Right.
and it is a lot to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So someone who is emotionally stable, I think,
Yeah.
would be a better fit for that program or this program.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, anyone with any type of interest can do this program. It doesn't have to fit your major,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're interested in learning about Irish history and
Yeah.
conflict.
No, that makes sense. And I guess, what do you think? Like, do you feel that studying abroad positively impacted you? And, like, do you feel like more confident with traveling or being by yourself or stuff like that?
Yeah, I definitely think it impacted me. I learned a lot of independence and like self confidence through that program,
Mm-hmm.
which I wasn't necessarily expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But I've really enjoyed it. I know how to do things on my own, and I don't want to be self or reliant, dependent on others
Right.
at this point. Um, I've learned a lot about just general world events, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's opened my mind to other perspectives as well, and really like listening and analyzing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's very valuable.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like, I mean, no shade to anyone else who's been on this podcast, but I feel like you have a lot of, like, very, it seems like you had a lot of very deep experiences while abroad and probably came back with, like, the most, like, emotional, like, health and awareness and stuff like that from this experience.
Yeah.
Was that more than you bargained for?
I mean, initially, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I learned a lot about myself and how I need to handle things.
Yeah.
So I think it was like one of the most valuable experiences I'll ever have.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, really glad that I did study abroad there.
Good.
I think it was a great benefit to me.
That's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that. I love to hear that people do feel like they really got something out of their programs more than just getting a, like, some people think that study abroad is like a, 2-month long vacation.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Yeah, at least not the programs Lawrence is going to send you on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me about the Northern Ireland program. I hope you enjoyed your time, and tune in next week for Beyond Borders, the LU Off Campus Programs podcast.